How's it going, everybody? This is Seth Isaacson, the lead historian here at Rock Island Auction Company. Here today to talk to you about another historic black powder firearm in our upcoming May premier firearms auction, May 13th, 14th, and 15th. So what I have before me today is a Samuel Colt presentation inscribed Colt new model 1855 revolving percussion full stock military pattern rifle with a bayonet. This 56 caliber military pattern carbine has a 24-inch barrel, and it's inscribed to Japanese Vice Ambassador or Second Ambassador Muragaki Norimasa with compliments of Colonel Colt. He was one of the members of the first Japanese embassy to the US in 1860. This was the first Japanese delegation sent outside of Asia, and their trip to the US, crossing the Pacific and then returning home across the Atlantic, down and around the Indian Ocean, and then up to Japan, made them among the first Japanese to make a trip around the globe. By visiting the United States first before other Western countries, the Japanese conferred on our country a great honor and gave the US international prestige. The Vice Ambassador wrote a diary of the whole adventure, which is very fascinating to read. He records how the Japanese delegation and their American counterparts were fascinated with one another's cultures. Among the various forms of entertainment provided to the ambassadors recorded in this diary were demonstrations of American firearms, including Colt revolvers. And their inventory of gifts brought back includes many firearms, including 2 Colt carbines, 2 Colt revolvers, 100 sets of revolver spare parts, 59 sets of carbine spare parts. By 1860, the Japanese had already been producing their own copies of Colt's 1851 Navy. The delegation came to the U.S. to exchange ratifications of the Harris Treaty, which gave the U.S. commercial and diplomatic privileges in Japan and expanded American interests in the country following its forced opening by American Commodore Matthew Perry in 1853 after hundreds of years of Japanese isolation. Naturally, inside Japan there was resistance to opening up the country to outsiders, and the Ronin samurai actually assassinated one of the shogun's chief ministers using a copy of a Colt Model 1851 Navy while this delegation was still en route to the United States. Attacks on Westerners in Japan also occurred in the 1860s, leading to reprisals by the US, United Kingdom, France, and Netherlands in 1863 and 1864, while the US was largely busy with the American Civil War. Japan also ultimately erupted into a civil war in the late 1860s, culminating in the Meiji Restoration. The markings on the buttstock indicate the prefect this gun was in following the Restoration. Japan, of course, famously became one of the Axis powers during World War II and an enemy of the United States following the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The included documentation indicates this rifle was actually brought back to the United States during the occupation of Japan at the end of World War II by Lieutenant Stuart M. Beard III. This historically significant Colt Model 1855 revolving rifle is an excellent example of Samuel Colt's efforts to expand his business internationally. In the 1850s, he famously, put his firearms on display at the World's Fairs in Europe, opened a factory in London, but he wasn't content with that. He wanted to expand internationally around the globe to have his firearms be the preeminent firearms. And this is an excellent way to do that. This was the first Japanese delegation coming to the United States. Prior to the opening of Japan in the 1850s, the Japanese military was still using matchlocks. So to show them something like a revolving rifle, one of the most advanced firearms of the period, made a lot of sense and definitely gave Colt the opportunity to potentially become the main supplier of the Japanese military. This historic rifle will be featured in the Rock Island Auction Company's May 13th, 14th, and 15th premier firearms auction. Definitely check out the catalog for the full description on this amazing Samuel Colt presentation firearm.